Max Verstappen crossed the finish line in Australia far from the podium. At first glance, it looked like a disappointing start to the 2026 season. But what happened during that race could actually change the entire championship. Because the first Grand Prix of the new regulation era just delivered 3 shocking signals to the Formula One world. Mercedes suddenly looks like the fastest team on the grid. Ferrari is already fighting for victories. And Red Bull, the team that dominated the previous era, is suddenly chasing the leaders. Yet inside that chaos, Verstappen did something most fans completely missed. While everyone focused on the Mercedes 1-2 finish, Max quietly turned a difficult race into critical damage control. No dramatic overtakes. No viral comeback. Just a calculated recovery that might become extremely important later in the season. And here is the detail that makes this story even more interesting. Red Bull did not arrive in Australia with their full car. Not even close. Several insiders believe the RB22 we saw in Melbourne was only the starting version, a conservative package designed to collect data rather than dominate. Which raises a dangerous possibility for the rest of the grid. What if Red Bull is still hiding its real performance? Because if Verstappen managed to secure strong points with a car that is still being understood, what happens when the Real upgrades arrive? That answer might decide the entire 2026 championship. But to understand why this race in Australia is far more important than it looks, we need to break down exactly what happened to Red Bull, to Verstappen, and to rookie Isaac Hadjar during the opening battle of the new Formula One era. And trust me, one detail from this race could change everything. The moment the cars arrived in Melbourne, something already felt different. Not dramatic. Not obvious. But different. Because for the first time in years, Red Bull did not look like the team everyone else was chasing. During the previous era, when the cars rolled out of the garage, there was always a sense of certainty around the Milton Keynes team. The car was fast. The balance was perfect. And Max Verstappen usually controlled the weekend before the race had even started. But Australia 2026 did not feel like that. The new regulation era has changed everything. New hybrid systems. New aerodynamic balance. New energy management rules. And those changes are far more complex than most fans realize. The new power units now rely heavily on electrical deployment strategies. Energy recovery. Energy storage. Energy release at exactly the right moment. And if one element of that system is not perfectly synchronized, the entire performance window collapses. That is why Melbourne became the most unpredictable season opener in years. Some teams arrived extremely confident. Others arrived quietly cautious. Red Bull clearly belonged to the second group. Because when engineers began analyzing the first long runs during the weekend, a surprising pattern started to appear. Mercedes looked incredibly comfortable. Ferrari looked aggressive. And Red Bull looked like a team still learning its own machine. This does not mean the RB22 is slow. But it does mean something very important. The car is not yet fully understood. And that is a dangerous situation in Formula One. Because when a team does not completely understand the behavior of a new car, drivers must operate inside a narrower window. They cannot push every lap. They cannot gamble with tire life. They cannot attack every opportunity. They must think long term. And that is exactly what Max Verstappen appeared to do in Australia. Instead of forcing aggressive moves early in the race, he adopted a completely different approach. Patience. Calculation. Control. From the outside, it almost looked quiet. But inside the cockpit, every lap was part of a bigger strategy. Because Verstappen knew something that most viewers did not yet realize. This race was not about winning. It was about understanding the car. It was about gathering information. It was about surviving the first test of the new Formula One era. And while Max carefully built his race, another story was beginning to develop inside the Red Bull garage. A story involving the second car. A rookie. And a problem that would soon complicate the team's entire Sunday. Inside the Red Bull garage, there was another story unfolding. And it involved a driver who suddenly found himself under enormous pressure. Isaac Hadjar. For many fans, Australia was the first real look at him as a full-time Formula One driver. A new season. A brand new generation of cars. And one of the most demanding environments a rookie can face. Because driving for Red Bull is never simple. Every move is observed. Every lap is analyzed. And every result is immediately compared to one person. Max Verstappen. That comparison alone creates a level of pressure that very few young drivers are prepared for. But the challenge in Melbourne was even bigger. Because the 2026 cars are not just faster machines. They are more complicated. Much more complicated. The hybrid systems require constant management. Drivers must balance energy harvesting and deployment every lap. They must adjust electrical output during overtakes. They must control the battery state during long stints. And they must do all of this while fighting wheel-to-wheel at over 300 kilometers per hour. For an experienced champion like Verstappen, that challenge becomes part of the game. For a rookie, it becomes a test. During the opening phase of the race, Hadjar showed glimpses of speed. The pace was not disastrous. In fact, in certain sectors, his lap times looked promising. But here is where the reality of Formula One becomes brutal. Speed alone is not enough. The systems must work perfectly. The car must stay inside its operating window. And in a brand new regulation cycle, that window can be incredibly small. Somewhere during the race, something went wrong. The Red Bull number 2 car suddenly disappeared from the competitive order. Then came the confirmation. Retirement. Did not finish. The exact technical cause has not been fully explained yet. But early speculation inside the paddock points toward reliability concerns linked to the complexity of the new energy systems. And this is not surprising. When Formula One introduces major regulatory changes, the first races often reveal hidden weaknesses. New software. New hybrid architecture. New cooling demands. Every manufacturer is still discovering the limits. For Red Bull, this meant one thing. The team suddenly lost half of its race strategy. Because in modern Formula One, 2 cars are not just 2 opportunities to score points. They are 2 pieces of a strategic puzzle. 1 car can pressure rivals. 1 car can experiment with strategy. 1 car can force competitors to react. But when 1 car retires early, the entire tactical structure collapses. Suddenly, everything depends on a single driver. And in Australia, that driver was Max Verstappen. Which meant that his quiet recovery was no longer just about saving his own race. It became about saving Red Bull's entire weekend. But here is where the story becomes even more interesting. Because while Red Bull was trying to stabilize their race, something much bigger was happening at the front of the field. Something that could completely reshape the balance of power in Formula One. And almost nobody expected it. While Red Bull was trying to stabilize their race, something much bigger was happening at the front of the field. And almost nobody predicted it before the weekend began. Mercedes. Not just competitive. Dominant. From the first phase of the race, George Russell looked completely in control of the Grand Prix. Calm on the radio. Smooth through the corners. Consistent lap after lap. The car looked stable in every condition. Low fuel. Heavy fuel. Fresh tires. Used tires. It did not matter. The Mercedes simply worked. And that is extremely important in the first race of a new regulatory era. Because when Formula One introduces new technical rules, the biggest advantage is not raw speed. It is understanding. Understanding how the car behaves. Understanding how the energy systems interact. Understanding how to extract performance without destroying the tires. And in Melbourne, Mercedes looked like the team that understood their machine better than anyone else. Russell controlled the pace. Not aggressively, but confidently. Behind him, something even more interesting was happening. Andrea Kimi Antonelli. Still one of the youngest drivers on the grid, yet driving with remarkable composure. Lap after lap, he protected the second position. No mistakes. No panic. Just precise, controlled driving. And that allowed Mercedes to build something extremely valuable in Formula One. A strategic shield. Because with 2 cars leading the race, they could control the tempo. They could dictate pit windows. They could react instantly to Ferrari. Speaking of Ferrari, Charles Leclerc was waiting. Watching. Applying pressure whenever the gap slightly opened. The Ferrari looked fast. Very fast. But not quite fast enough to break the Mercedes wall. And that battle at the front slowly began sending a powerful message to the rest of the paddock. The balance of power might be shifting. For the last several years, the conversation in Formula One always started with one question. How far ahead is Red Bull? But in Australia, the conversation suddenly changed. Now the question was different. How far ahead is Mercedes? And this is the moment where Verstappen's race becomes even more important. Because while Russell, Antonelli, and Leclerc were fighting for victory, Max was observing everything. The tire degradation. The energy deployment patterns. The straight line speeds. The corner exits. Every lap was information. Information that Red Bull engineers desperately needed. Because the truth about the 2026 season might not be decided by the first race. It will be decided by who develops the fastest. And if there is one team in Formula One history that knows how to evolve a car during the season, it is Red Bull. Which means the real story of Australia might not be the Mercedes victory. It might be something far more dangerous. The amount of data Verstappen and Red Bull just collected. Data that could completely change the next races of the championship. And when you look closely at the final laps of the race, you start to notice something very interesting about Verstappen's pace. Something that could worry Mercedes much sooner than they expect. By the time the race entered its final phase in Melbourne, most fans were watching the fight for the podium. Russell leading, Antonelli protecting second, Leclerc pushing from behind. But deeper in the field, Max Verstappen was quietly doing something that did not immediately appear on television. His lap times were getting faster. Not dramatically, but consistently. Lap after lap, the Red Bull started producing stronger numbers. The gap to the cars ahead stopped growing. Then something even more interesting happened. The pace stabilized. That detail may sound small, but in Formula One, stability means everything. Because throughout the early part of the race, several teams struggled with the new hybrid energy cycles. Drivers reported irregular deployment. Some cars lost electrical boost earlier than expected on the straights. Others had difficulty maintaining the ideal battery charge during long stints. But Verstappen's Red Bull began looking more and more predictable as the race progressed. The car was finally entering its operating window. The tires were under control. The energy system looked balanced. And that allowed Verstappen to push harder in the final segment of the Grand Prix. Not enough to attack the podium, but enough to do something extremely important. Secure solid points. Because when the checkered flag finally waved over Albert Park, the result confirmed what the entire paddock had started to suspect. George Russell won the first race of the 2026 season. Mercedes secured a powerful 1-2 finish with Antonelli. Charles Leclerc completed the podium for Ferrari. And Max Verstappen crossed the line around 6th place. At first glance, that result might not sound impressive for a driver who has dominated Formula One in recent years. But the real value of that result becomes clear when you understand the context. This was the first race of an entirely new technical era. New engines, new hybrid systems, new aerodynamic philosophies. And in these moments, the teams that survive the chaos often become the teams that fight for the championship later. Because the most dangerous thing for any team in Formula One is not finishing 6th. The most dangerous thing is not finishing at all. And Red Bull avoided that scenario with their lead driver. While other teams revealed weaknesses, Red Bull gathered data. While other drivers pushed their cars beyond the limit, Verstappen studied the race, studied the pace of Mercedes, studied the strengths of Ferrari, studied the weaknesses of the new regulations. And that information may become far more valuable than a single podium. Because here is the part many fans are only beginning to realize. The Red Bull we saw in Australia may not be the real Red Bull of 2026. Inside the paddock, several engineers have quietly suggested something intriguing. The RB22 that raced in Melbourne was not the full version of the car. Not the full aerodynamic package. Not the full development plan. Instead, it was a controlled starting point. A stable baseline. A version of the car designed to collect information before major upgrades arrive. And if that is true, then the rest of the grid might have a problem. Because Red Bull has built its reputation on one thing above everything else: development speed. When they understand a car, they evolve it faster than almost anyone. Which means the most important race of the season might not be Australia. It might be the next few races. The moment when the first major upgrades arrive. The moment when Red Bull reveals how much performance is still hidden inside the RB22. And if those upgrades unlock the potential that engineers believe exists inside this car, then the quiet recovery Verstappen delivered in Melbourne may suddenly look very different. Because sometimes the most dangerous race of the season is not the one you win. It is the one where your biggest rival learns exactly how to beat you.